They say growing old makes it easier to let go. That's a lie. When my grandson told me I wasn't real family anymore, standing in my kitchen, in my house, built brick by brick with my husband's hands and mine, something in me snapped, not from hurt, from clarity. He sipped coffee from my mug and spoke with the calm tone of a man explaining facts to a confused neighbor. Things are different now, and in that moment, I realized I had a choice: keep disappearing or reclaim what was mine. Caleb is 34. He used to be a sweet boy, quiet, eyes like his father's, with a habit of folding napkins into perfect squares. After my son, his father, passed, Caleb became my tether to what was left of our family. He got into construction, married Morgan, had a baby, and one spring morning they arrived on my porch with boxes and tired smiles. "Just for a couple months, Grandma, till we get back on our feet." I believed them. Why wouldn't I? They were struggling. Rents were outrageous, the baby was still small. My house had 3 bedrooms. I even cleaned up the old crib from the attic. I made space. I made pies. I made room in my life for theirs. The first weeks felt almost like a holiday. Morgan laughed easily in the kitchen. Caleb helped trim the hedges. We watched old movies in the evenings like we used to. I was so sure we were a family again. But the laughter changed. "Do you always wear those slippers?" Morgan would say, with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This smell. Is it your pillows, maybe?" Always sweet, always gentle, but something underneath that made my chest tight. Caleb said nothing. He used to defend me once. 3 months passed, then 5, then 7. The boxes never moved. The crib stayed. My kitchen was rearranged. "This way is more efficient," Caleb said. I couldn't find my own pans. One morning, I stepped into the living room and my chair was gone. My favorite old chair, replaced by something grey and square and cold. A giant TV took over the wall. "We figured it was time to modernize," Morgan said. No one had asked. I started waking up before dawn. Not from pain, from a feeling that I didn't belong. My house had become a place I moved through quietly, so I wouldn't disturb their rhythm. I wasn't allowed to pick up the baby unless asked. I stopped baking pies. No one seemed to notice. Until the morning, Caleb walked into my bedroom, without knocking, and said, "Grandma, Morgan and I talked. You've been great, really. But this doesn't feel like your space anymore. We need more privacy. We're a growing family. I hope you understand." He smiled, standing in the home I paid off with decades of labor, sipping coffee brewed with water from my tap. I didn't say a word. I waited until he left, then opened the closet where I keep important papers. Title to the house, my accounts, power of attorney forms, all of it. I made tea for myself and sat at the table. Across from me, a faded photo, me and John, my husband, grinning in front of the house before it had walls. John wouldn't have let this happen. He would have looked me in the eye and said, "Meg, it's time. Time to stop shrinking. Time to stop hoping they'll change. Time to take the keys back, all of them." And that's what I did. The first thing I did was call the locksmith. I told him the front door lock was old, which it was, and needed replacing. "You'll want new keys cut?" he asked. "Just one," I replied. There was a pause on the other end of the line, like he was waiting for an explanation. I didn't offer one. I didn't owe anyone anything. While I waited for him to arrive, I opened the hallway closet and stared at the rows of shoes that weren't mine. Morgan had at least 5 pairs lined up neatly. Caleb's boots were muddy. The baby's tiny sneakers looked like something from a catalogue. None of them belonged here. Not really. They'd been here 7 months and still treated the house like a hotel, a place to crash, take, leave messes, never clean up, never say thank you. I found a cardboard box and started filling it with their things. Not everything, just enough to send a message. Baby toys scattered under the coffee table. Morgan's diet shakes from the fridge. Caleb's drill kit left out in the hallway for weeks. I placed the box by the front door, neatly taped, with a post-it. You left these in common areas. Please move them to your room, or elsewhere. That felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. When the locksmith arrived, he was polite and efficient. A young man with tired eyes and a quiet voice. He didn't ask questions when I handed him the new key and said, "Only one." He didn't flinch when I locked the door behind him after he left and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. That night, I slept with the window cracked open for the first time in years. The breeze felt good on my face. It reminded me of nights when John and I would lie in bed, listening to the wind through the trees, whispering things we were too afraid to say out loud. "Don't let them take you for granted, Meg." I could almost hear him. "You don't owe anyone your silence." The next morning, Caleb noticed the lock. Of course he did. "Why isn't my key working?" he asked, standing in the hallway with confusion written all over his face. "I had the lock changed," I said calmly. "I was stirring oatmeal, my breakfast, not theirs." He looked startled. "Why would you do that?" "Because this is my house, Caleb." He opened his mouth to argue, but Morgan appeared behind him with the baby on her hip. "What's going on?" she asked, eyeing me with suspicion. "Your key doesn't work anymore," I said. "If you'd like to stay, we'll need to discuss terms, rent, boundaries, duration." Caleb laughed, short and disbelieving. "Grandma, are you serious?" I turned off the stove and faced them. "You said I wasn't family anymore, that I didn't belong. Well, this is me agreeing with you." Morgan shifted the baby, her jaw tightening. "You're being dramatic." I nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you'll find I've earned the right." They stood there for a while, not knowing what to say. I watched Caleb's face as it dawned on him that I wasn't bluffing, that maybe the woman who raised him, who paid his way through trade school, who held his hand through grief, wasn't going to be so easy to dismiss after all. He turned and walked away. Morgan didn't. She lingered for a moment, eyes flicking across the kitchen, judging the curtains, the dishes in the sink, maybe me. Then she followed him, saying nothing. I sat down and ate my breakfast. No one spoke to me the rest of the day. By evening, they were in their room with the door closed. No music, no television, no apology. Good. I didn't need noise anymore. I needed peace. And I was starting to remember what that felt like. The silence lasted 3 days. No footsteps in the hallway, no slamming cupboard doors, no Morgan clattering pans like a warning bell every morning. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old kitchen clock, and the occasional rustle of the newspaper I now read cover to cover again. Like I used to, before the house filled with noise that wasn't mine. I noticed something strange in that quiet. I wasn't lonely. On the third morning, I found a note on the kitchen table. Neat handwriting, definitely Morgan's. "We're not sure what you're trying to prove. We'll be gone by the end of the week. Please don't touch our things." I folded the note and placed it under the sugar bowl. There had been a time, not so long ago, when even the idea of them leaving would have crushed me. Not because I needed them, but because I'd spent years convincing myself that family, any kind of family, was better than none. That their presence, however conditional, was proof that I still mattered to someone. But that morning, as I swept the porch and trimmed the roses by the front gate, I realized They weren't company. They were shadows, and they had made my house cold. That afternoon, I walked to the bank. It was a warm, dusty day. I wore the sun hat John had always teased me about. Said it made me look like I ran a boarding school. At the counter, I asked to see Mr. Carlton, the same man who'd helped us refinance the mortgage after John's stroke. He still remembered me, still smiled like he meant it. "I'd like to update my account authorizations," I said. He nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Richardson. What do you have in mind?" I handed him the forms I'd filled out the night before. I'd stayed up past midnight, rereading every line. "I'm removing Caleb Richardson as an authorized user, effective immediately." Mr. Carlton blinked. "Understood. And I'd like to cancel the automatic transfers to the joint account I set up for him and Morgan. That was for groceries and essentials. They'll be taking care of that themselves now." He looked at the screen, typing carefully. "Would you like to set up new permissions for anyone else? Family? A trustee?" I hesitated. Then I said, "Not yet." Walking home, I passed the community centre and saw the notice board full of flyers, book clubs, quilting groups, gardening circles. Things I used to think were for women who'd given up. Now they looked like women who'd just finally gotten time to do what they liked. Back at home, the door was unlocked. Caleb was in the hallway, arms full of boxes, sweat darkening the collar of his t-shirt. "You went to the bank," he said. I didn't answer, just moved past him to the kitchen. He followed. "You blocked the account." "I did." "You know we were counting on that money, Grandma." I poured myself a glass of water. "You also said I wasn't real family anymore, so I figured you wouldn't mind." He stared at me, mouth half open. Then he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "So that's how it is now? Tit for tat?" "No," I said. "It's finally not tit for tat. It's just done." Morgan appeared behind him, arms crossed. "You could have just asked us to leave." "I did," I replied. "You just didn't hear me." They left the next day. No goodbyes, no thank yous. Just the low rumble of their car engine fading down the street, and a front room filled with dust and silence. I stood in the middle of the house, staring at the empty spaces where their things had been. And I exhaled. Not with joy, not with sorrow, just with relief. It's strange how loud a quiet house can feel when it's finally yours again. After they left, I walked from room to room like a visitor in my own life. The guest bedroom, stripped down to a mattress and a forgotten sock in the corner. The hallway where their coats used to hang, now empty, but still carrying the smell of cologne and baby powder. The living room, mine again, sunlit and dust-speckled, like it had been waiting to breathe. I opened windows in every room, not to let them out, just to let me back in. That first evening alone, I sat in my armchair, my real one, the one they'd stuffed into the garage to make space for their grey monstrosity, and made tea just the way I like it. Strong, with a splash of cream. I watched the sun go down behind the maple trees and listened to nothing but the tick of the wall clock and the wind nudging the branches. It was the first time in months I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. The next morning, I opened the garage. It was still half filled with the things I'd loved, and they hadn't. My reading lamp, the quilt John's mother made us when we got married, the wooden stool I used to sit on when planting tomatoes. I began carrying it all back inside. Slowly, one thing at a time. I found the yellow teacups with the chipped edges. Morgan once said they looked too antique to be sanitary. I ran my fingers over the cracks and smiled. That was the point. They'd been through things. Like me. In the back corner of the garage, I found a plastic bin marked MISC. Inside, photos. Old ones. Caleb as a boy, running through the sprinkler. My son at his high school graduation. John holding our first Christmas tree steady while I tied on a crooked red bow. I carried the bin to the dining room and began laying the pictures out across the table. Not out of nostalgia, out of reclamation. These were my years, my memories, my proof that I had built something worth keeping. Around midday, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. I finally answered on the fifth try. "Grandma, it's Caleb," he said, his voice low, cautious. "We didn't want things to end like that." I said nothing. "I know you're upset, but we're family. That's not supposed to change." I almost laughed. "You said I wasn't real family, Caleb," I reminded him. "You said it to my face, in my kitchen." He sighed. "I didn't mean it like that. We were stressed. The baby wasn't sleeping. Morgan was overwhelmed." I waited. He tried again. "Maybe we could talk. Just us." "I think we've done enough talking," I said. "Now I'm listening. To myself, for once." He was silent for a long moment. "I just don't get it," he finally said. "You were always the one we could count on." And that was the problem. "I'm done being counted on by people who only show up with empty hands," I replied. "Grandma, come on." I hung up. I stood there, holding the phone, hands steady. For the first time in years, I wasn't shaking after a confrontation. I wasn't wondering if I'd done the right thing. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was just me. And that, finally, was enough. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was upset. There was no anxiety buzzing under my ribs, no rehearsed arguments playing on a loop in my head. I just wasn't used to the quiet anymore. Real quiet. Not the kind you get when everyone's sulking behind closed doors, but the kind that fills a house when you've reclaimed every inch of it. The kind that comes when no one's listening through the walls. At 4 a.m., I got up and made toast. I ate it slowly in the kitchen, barefoot, standing by the sink in my robe. The linoleum was cold and real under my feet. For a moment, I felt young again, not in body, but in that rare way that comes when no one expects anything from you. No breakfast to make for anyone. No forced smiles or careful phrasing. Just bread, butter, and me. That morning, I started making a list. Not a grocery list. Not chores. A different kind. I took out an old yellow pad and wrote in ink things I let go of too easily. Number 1, my privacy. Number 2, my name on my own mailbox, replaced temporarily with theirs by a label Caleb printed just for deliveries. Number 3, the kitchen radio. Unplugged because Morgan said it clashed with her podcasts. I kept going. Pages of it. Some small, some not. The time they used my car without asking. The day I came home from the doctor and found all my photo frames turned around to make the room look less cluttered. The time Morgan snapped at me for folding the baby's clothes the wrong way, as if I'd never raised children of my own. The list was long. Too long for someone who was supposed to be just helping family for a little while. Around noon, I walked to the post office. I hadn't been in months. There was a letter in my box, a utility bill with their names still on it. I asked the clerk to update the address records. "I'm the only resident now," I said, and she nodded without question. Funny how simple that was. On the way home, I stopped by the lawyer's office, an old building on Main Street, where John and I had signed our will decades ago. The receptionist still remembered me, called me Mrs. Richardson, with that mix of warmth and respect that only people from small towns can manage without sounding forced. I asked for an appointment. "Just some updates to the paperwork," I told her. She gave me Thursday at 10. That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees and listened to the sounds I used to love: the tree frogs, a neighbour's screen door, a dog somewhere barking into the dark. And I thought about the future, not with dread, with curiosity. I didn't know exactly what was next, only that it would belong to me, and that no one, not even blood, would be allowed to claim space in my life without earning it. Not again. Thursday morning came with a steady drizzle and the kind of cold that settles deep into your bones. I still walked to the lawyer's office. I could have called a cab, but I didn't want the softness of that. I wanted to feel my steps, every one of them. The receptionist, a young woman named Dana, offered me tea while I waited. She called me Ma'am, in that way people do when they're not sure if they're speaking to someone fragile or someone firm. I didn't mind. She'd find out soon enough. When Mr. Henley came out to greet me, I stood. He'd aged, but not much. A few more lines at the corners of his mouth, perhaps. Still wore the same bow tie and smelled faintly of eucalyptus. He'd handled John's will all those years ago, sat with us through long afternoons, asking kind but precise questions. I trusted him. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Richardson?" I settled into the leather chair across from him, my back straight, the folder of documents on my lap. "I want to update my will," I said. "Remove a name, add some conditions." He didn't blink, just nodded once, clicked his pen. "Whose name are we removing?" "My grandson, Caleb Richardson." Another small nod. "Understood. And the additions?" "I'd like to name my great-niece, Lily Foster, as the primary beneficiary. She's in college, works part-time at a daycare, calls me every Sunday without fail, sends handwritten letters. She doesn't know I'm doing this. And she doesn't expect anything." "That's often the best kind," he said quietly. We reviewed everything line by line. I added a clause about the house. It was not to be sold immediately. Lily could live in it, rent it, even repaint it bright yellow if she wanted, but not flip it for profit, not turn it into a commodity. This house had held too many meals, too many tears, too many pieces of me to become someone's investment. Mr. Henley read through the updated draft, then looked up. "Anything else?" I hesitated. "Yes. I want to revoke the healthcare proxy I gave Caleb 5 years ago." His eyes met mine. "Do you want to name someone else?" I nodded. "Lily again. And if she declines, my friend Beatrice Simmons. She's known me longer than anyone still breathing." The papers were signed, copies made, hands shaken. When I walked out of that office, I felt taller. And then I went to the grocery store. That sounds ordinary, I know. But I hadn't done a proper grocery run in almost a year. Not since Morgan insisted on streamlining the food situation. She'd taken over all the shopping, preferred certain brands, had opinions on sodium and shelf stability. Before long, I'd stopped making lists at all. My own fridge had become unfamiliar to me. I walked those aisles like a woman returned to a country she used to love. Plums, cinnamon, sharp cheddar. I bought bread that wasn't gluten-free, butter that wasn't vegan, and milk in a glass bottle because I liked how it clinked. I packed the bags myself. At home, I made soup from scratch. I played music while it simmered, the old jazz station John used to hum along with. And as I stirred the pot, the kitchen warm and fogged with spice, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. I didn't look angry or sad. I looked like a woman who'd remembered her own name. And that was enough. It had been 2 weeks since they left. I marked it without meaning to. Just noticed one morning that the milk in the fridge had lasted longer, the cushions on the couch were still where I'd left them, and the air in the hallway didn't smell like someone else's cologne. The house had settled back into itself. Or maybe I had. That afternoon, I pulled down the box from the top shelf of the hall closet. It was labeled Jr. John Richardson, in my handwriting, faded but still legible. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. His cufflinks, the small green notebook he kept by the bed, and the folder we'd once titled, "In Case Something Happens." I opened it slowly. There were old account numbers, insurance documents, letters we wrote to each other in case of a hospital stay. The last one he wrote was dated 3 months before his final heart attack. I read it again, though I'd memorized every word long ago. Meg, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to help carry the load. But I know you. You'll try to carry it all anyway. Please remember, you don't have to. Say no. Say yes to yourself for once. You've earned that much. I folded the letter carefully, placed it on the table, and sat down beside it. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. It was like someone had just confirmed what I already knew. The decisions I'd made these past weeks, the lock, the accounts, the will, they weren't drastic. They were overdue. That night, Beatrice came over for tea. We've been friends since we were 19. She taught second grade for 40 years, has a voice that could hush an auditorium, and a laugh that could shake the ceiling tiles. When she saw the living room, her hand flew to her chest. "Well, I'll be damned," she said. "It's your house again." I smiled and poured the tea. She stayed for hours. We didn't talk about Caleb, not right away. We talked about the neighbor's ugly new mailbox and the way the pharmacy rearranged the shelves so nothing makes sense anymore. But when we reached the bottom of our cups, she looked at me carefully. "You all right, Meg?" "I am," I said. "More than I've been in a long time." "You thinking they'll come back?" I shook my head. "Not if they expect the same arrangement. Not if they think I'll forget." She leaned back. Good. Beatrice had seen it all happen, had watched, helpless, as I gave inch after inch, year after year. Once, 2 summers ago, she pulled me aside at the church potluck and whispered, "They're not guests, Meg. They're settlers." I hadn't known what to do with that then. Now I did. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small tin. "What's this?" I asked. "Shortbread," she said. "For celebration. You've finally taken your life back. That's worth a cookie." We laughed, and then we ate them all. Later, when the dishes were done and the porch light was on, she stood at the door and held my hands. "You ever doubt yourself, you call me," she said. "I'll remind you who you are." I nodded, and she walked off into the night. Back inside, I stood by the front door a long time. No one had come through it that I hadn't invited. That, too, was new, and it felt right. The next morning, I walked down to the corner bakery. It wasn't something I used to do often. Caleb didn't like me going out alone, said it made him nervous, though I suspected what he really meant was that he didn't want to be responsible if anything happened. Morgan had her own concerns. "What if you fall?" she said once, like I hadn't lived 76 years in this body, on these legs. But I walked that 3 blocks with my spine straight and my scarf tied tight under my chin. The wind was brisk, but I didn't mind. The sidewalk was uneven in places, cracked by tree roots that had grown through the concrete over time, just like me. A little older, a little rough around the edges, but rooted. The bakery smelled like cinnamon and yeast and melted butter. I stood in line behind a man in a suit who kept checking his watch. He bought a black coffee and a stale-looking muffin and left without a word. When it was my turn, the young woman at the counter smiled wide. "What can I get for you today, ma'am?" That word again, ma'am, but softer this time. Respectful, not cautious. 2 pecan rolls, I said. "One for now, one for someone I might visit?" I didn't know who that someone was yet. But it felt good to imagine offering something again, not out of duty, but choice. I sat at a small table by the window and unwrapped the first roll. It was warm, sticky, and perfect. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite. Outside, people rushed past with phones to their ears, jackets flapping open, children dragging behind them. None of them looked in. None of them knew what it had taken for me to sit there, alone, unbothered, full. On the way home, I stopped at the park. There was a bench near the duck pond where John and I used to sit. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. He'd bring peanuts, toss them to the birds, even when there were signs telling people not to. "They deserve something too," he'd say. I sat for a long while, the bag with the second pecan roll tucked into my coat. An older woman passed by with her granddaughter. I could tell by the way they walked together, unhurried, hand in hand. The girl skipped ahead to the edge of the water and pointed at something only she could see. I thought about Lily, my great-niece, the one I'd added to the will. I hadn't called her yet. I didn't know how to say it. I see you. I trust you. I choose you. It felt like too much and not enough at the same time, but maybe I would call. Maybe soon. That night, I pulled out John's letter again, the one he'd written before the last hospital visit. I'd read it at least 20 times since he died, but now it sounded different. Not like instructions, like permission. I set it beside my teacup and reached for the phone. Lily answered on the third ring. "Hi, Aunt Meg," she said brightly. "I was just thinking of you." Her voice cracked something open in me. Not pain, something cleaner, lighter. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "You busy?" "Never too busy for you. What's up?" And so I told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. That I'd been quiet too long. That sometimes people confuse kindness with weakness. That I wasn't doing that anymore. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "You've always been the strongest woman I know. I'm glad you're finally letting people see it." We talked until the tea went cold. When I hung up, I looked around the house, my house, and realized something simple, something I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just alone. I was safe. I called the locksmith again the next morning. Not because anything was broken. The new locks were still solid. The key turned clean in my palm. But I wanted to change the code on the back door. The keypad entry had been something Caleb installed for convenience, but I never quite trusted it. He'd set the code, shared it with Morgan, probably with half a dozen others too. I never liked the idea that people could walk in without knocking. Now, no one would. The locksmith was a different man this time. Polite, younger than the last, with hands that moved fast and respectfully. "Want to choose your own code?" he asked. I nodded. 1948. He smiled. "Birth year?" I didn't answer, just pressed the numbers in slowly as he watched. "Done?" he said. "Only you'll know it now." That was the point. After he left, I sat on the porch with a notebook. Not the yellow pad from earlier, not the list of things I'd let go. This was a new one, a blank one. And at the top of the first page I wrote, "Things I will no longer apologize for." I paused, took a sip of tea, then wrote, "Wanting my house quiet after 9 p.m., saying no without offering a reason, asking someone to knock before entering, wanting solitude, needing space, not trusting people who've already shown me who they are." The list grew quickly. It wasn't angry, just clear. Each line like a small reclamation, a fence put back up after years of leaving the gate wide open. Later that day, I cleaned the spare bedroom. The one Caleb and Morgan had used. It still smelled faintly of Morgan's perfume. Expensive. Sharp. I opened all the windows and stripped the bed, took down the blackout curtains they'd installed, and rehung the white lace ones I'd kept in a drawer. The light filtered in, soft and warm. The room looked like it remembered itself. I boxed up everything they'd left behind. A sweater, a phone charger, an old baby spoon. I didn't plan to throw them away, just out of my sight. I didn't want reminders of silence that was never peaceful, only pointed. That evening, I called my bank again. I asked them to send a copy of the final statements from the shared account I'd dissolved. I didn't need proof of anything. I already knew. But I wanted closure. "Would you like a printed copy or digital?" the clerk asked. "Printed," I said. "I like to hold things in my hands." The envelope arrived 2 days later. I opened it in the kitchen, under the same lamp that used to light our dinner table. I read each page slowly. The withdrawals were all familiar. Grocery stores, gas stations, baby supplies. And then, mixed in, salon appointments, designer boutiques, even a hotel in the city for one weekend I'd never heard about. There was nothing shocking, but everything was confirming. I put the papers back into the envelope and sealed it shut. I didn't need to revisit them. I only needed to know that the generosity had been treated like a given, like an account that would never run dry. But it had. And I was the one who closed it. That night, I sat by the window and watched the street grow dark. No calls came, no apologies. Good. Sometimes silence is just the space where your own voice can finally echo back. They showed up on a Tuesday. No warning, no phone call. Just the sound of tires crunching gravel and a car door slamming shut. I was in the garden, gloves on, clippers in hand. I'd been trimming the rose bushes, something I hadn't done since the summer before they moved in. The petals were heavy with dew, the soil dark and soft. It felt good to work with something that responded to care. I heard footsteps, and then his voice. "Grandma?" I turned. Caleb was standing at the edge of the yard, hands in his pockets. Morgan stayed by the car, arms folded across her chest, sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not unkindly. "We wanted to talk," he said. "Can we come in?" "No." He blinked. "We're just here to clear the air." "The air is already clear," I said, turning back to the roses. He stepped closer. "You won't even hear us out?" "I've done nothing but listen, Caleb, for months, to silence, to complaints, to the sound of my own boundaries being stepped over. I'm done with that." Morgan finally moved, walking up the path like someone inspecting a property. "You're really going to hold a grudge after everything?" she said. "I'm not holding a grudge," I replied. "I'm holding my ground." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from when he was a boy. "We were under a lot of stress. The baby wasn't sleeping. I was working crazy hours. Morgan was trying to keep things together." "I remember," I said. "I was there, doing laundry, cooking meals, rocking that baby at 3 a.m. while you both slept." Morgan scoffed. "You offered." "I did," I nodded. "And I would again. But not for people who think kindness is a free subscription they can cancel when they're done." He took a step forward. "We just want to talk, Grandma. You changed the locks. You cut off the account. You took us out of the will." "I did," I said simply. "You said I wasn't real family, so I stopped acting like it." He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to say it aloud. "You know I didn't mean that," he muttered. "But you said it, and that matters." Morgan crossed her arms tighter. "So what? You're just going to sit in this old house until you die? Alone?" I took off my gloves, brushed the dirt from my palms, and looked at her directly. I built this house with my husband's hands and mine. Every beam, every board, every paid-off mortgage payment. We did that. And I'll be here as long as I want to be. Not alone. Not anymore. Just free. Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. I picked up my clippers and turned back to the bush. "You can take what you left in the garage," I said over my shoulder. "The boxes are labeled. I didn't touch anything. After that, I'd appreciate if you didn't come by unannounced." "We're family," he said, quietly. "That's not supposed to be temporary." "No," I agreed. "It's not. But respect is. And you ran out of that a long time ago." Morgan muttered something under her breath, but didn't say it twice. They walked back to the car. I didn't follow, didn't watch them drive off. Instead, I turned the hose on low and watered the roots. They didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. The garage was emptier now. Just a few stray boxes, none of them mine. I'd given them until Sunday to collect what was left, and when the deadline passed, I put the remaining items out by the curb, wrapped in plastic to guard against the rain. I watched from the porch as a truck pulled up and loaded them in. I didn't ask who sent it. I didn't care. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not like waiting, not like grief. It felt earned. Inside, the house held itself differently too. The walls breathed. The rooms stayed tidy. I could walk barefoot without stepping on plastic toys. The radio played soft jazz in the mornings, and the kitchen smelled like cardamom and lemon, not protein powder and disinfectant. I found myself humming again. That surprised me. One afternoon, I opened the top drawer of my desk, the one I hadn't touched in months, and found a birthday card from Caleb from years ago, before Morgan, before everything felt conditional. It said, "Love you always, Grandma. Thank you for everything you've done for me." The handwriting was round and careful. He must have been 20 or so. I stared at it for a long time, not with anger, not even sadness, just recognition. He'd meant it then. That was real once. But real doesn't mean permanent. And love without respect is just sentiment, pretty words that vanish when tested. That evening I called Lily again. She picked up right away. "Hi, Aunt Meg." Her voice always lifted something inside me. We talked about her classes, her job, how she'd finally saved enough to buy a second-hand bike so she didn't have to take the bus. She didn't ask for anything, didn't even know yet about the trust I was setting up in her name. She was just there, honest and present, and hers. "I was thinking," I said after a while, "maybe you could come visit next weekend, if you're free." There was a pause, then a bright yes, that kind that feels like sunlight through a window you forgot was there. "I'll bring cake," she said. "Or you want me to bake instead?" "You bake," I told her. "I've got tea." We said goodbye, and I sat there for a long time afterward, holding the warm shape of her voice in my chest. Not because she was perfect, but because she made me feel seen. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name, printed in Caleb's handwriting. I took it to the kitchen, laid it flat on the table, and stared at it. My first instinct was to leave it unopened. But curiosity isn't weakness. And I was done being afraid of words. Inside, one sheet of paper. Grandma. I'm not good at saying things right. I guess I never was. I thought living with you would be a bridge back to something we lost. I didn't see what I was doing to you. I see it now. I know we messed up. I know I can't take back the things I said, but I hope someday we can try again. We. Caleb. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer beside the birthday card. Not to revisit, not yet, maybe never. But because it reminded me of something important. People can change, but you don't have to wait for them to do it. You're allowed to move on before the apology comes. The morning Lily arrived, the house felt different. Not in any dramatic way. No thunderclap of emotion, no cinematic swell of strings. Just ready. As if it had been waiting for someone who would walk through the front door and treat every room like it meant something. Like it had history, not just square footage. I'd baked scones early, the kind with dried cranberries and a little orange zest. The recipe was mine, passed down from my mother. Caleb never liked them, said they were too dry. But Lily took one bite and smiled wide. These taste like something you'd wrap in a cloth napkin and carry in your pocket just in case life got hard. I laughed. A real one. Not the kind you give out of politeness. We sat on the porch most of the afternoon, watching the neighborhood move around us. Strollers, bikes, couples arguing about groceries. Lily told me about a class she loved and a professor she didn't. About a boy who'd texted her too much and then ghosted her altogether. She rolled her eyes and said, 20-something boys are basically children in expensive sneakers. I told her that wasn't a new phenomenon. She asked about John, about the early years, about how we met, how we stayed together, what we argued about. She asked the kind of questions only people who genuinely want to know will ask. And when I answered, she listened without interrupting, without trying to relate it back to herself. She just listened. At one point, she reached over and took my hand. "I'm glad you called," she said. "I always hoped you would." I wanted to say, "Me too." But it came out different. "I almost didn't," I admitted. For a long time, I thought choosing someone new meant letting go of someone old. She didn't let go of my hand. "I don't think it's about choosing," she said. "I think it's about recognizing who's already showing up." We stayed like that for a while, not speaking. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere down the block, a screen door creaked open. The kind of sound you forget you miss until you hear it again. After she left, I walked back through the house, touching small things. The teacup she used, the folded napkin, the empty plate on the side table. Traces of presence, not intrusion. I realized then how much space can carry memory, depending on how it's filled. The next day, I took the boxes of Caleb and Morgan's leftover things, the ones they'd never asked for, and carried them to the donation center. Nothing of sentimental value, just sweaters, books, some baby items too small to keep. I signed the receipt without hesitation. Letting go isn't the same as throwing away. It's more like pruning. You don't hate the branch. You just know the tree needs light. That night, I moved my chair back to the spot it had always belonged, near the window, facing west, where the last of the day's light falls in golden streaks across the floor. I sat down with a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "This is not the end of anything." And I meant it. The first morning, I truly noticed the silence. It didn't feel like absence. It felt like breath. I woke up with no noise outside my door, no thump of heavy feet in the hallway, no baby crying through thin walls, no kitchen clatter of someone else laying claim to the day before I'd even had a chance to greet it. Just morning light through the lace curtains and the soft creak of my bones as I stretched beneath warm blankets. I didn't rush to get dressed, didn't worry about being in the way or too early, or whether the bathroom would be occupied. I moved slowly, deliberately. Every gesture belonged to me. I made coffee, the strong kind, the way John liked it, and stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring out at the backyard. The roses had started to bloom again. It was subtle, just a few brave buds near the base, but it felt like something answered, like the house had heard the shift in me. That morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I set the table for one, carefully, like it mattered. Cloth napkin, plate, fork and knife. A soft-boiled egg in the little porcelain cup I used to save for Sundays. Toast cut in triangles, not because anyone asked, but because I liked it better that way. I ate slowly, with the radio murmuring old tunes in the background, and didn't once look at the clock. After breakfast, I opened the linen closet. It had always been cluttered. Mismatched towels, old sheets crammed behind newer ones, Caleb's spare pillow, Morgan's curling iron box wedged in behind the door. Now, it was neat. Just what I used. Just what I needed. I stood there longer than necessary, breathing in the faint scent of lavender from the sachets I'd tucked in long ago, forgotten until now. It's funny, the things you notice when no one is watching, the quiet beauty of a folded towel, the softness of a rug under bare feet, the way light falls across a clean floor, unbroken. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt here, whole, in the most ordinary way. That afternoon, I wrote a letter. Not to Caleb, not to Morgan, to myself. Dear Meg, I began. You waited too long to speak, but you finally did. That counts. That's enough. I wrote for nearly an hour, not to blame, not to relive, just to name what had happened, what I'd survived, what I would no longer explain away. And when I finished, I didn't cry. I took the letter and folded it into the notebook, between the pages where I'd started writing again. Not lists, not rules, just words. Pieces of the self I'd put on a shelf for too long. That night, I lit a candle in the hallway. A small ritual, not for them, for me. I walked from room to room and whispered, "This is mine. This is mine. This is mine." The walls didn't answer. They didn't have to. I knew. I didn't expect anything to change overnight. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't crash in like a storm. It moves slowly, like the way light creeps into a room you forgot had windows. That's how it felt, those next few days. Like the house was remembering how to hold just one person again. Like I was remembering how to live without bracing for interruption. I started rearranging things, not big changes, not yet. But I moved the lamp in the living room back to its original corner, the one where John used to sit and read. I dusted off the old bookshelf, pulled out paperbacks I hadn't touched in years. I opened one and found a dried flower pressed between the pages, still faintly fragrant. Every object seemed to be waiting for me to come back to it. The days found rhythm. Morning coffee, a walk through the garden, lunch at the little kitchen table, letters from Lily, calls from Beatrice, evenings with a book and the porch light on. One afternoon, I got a call from a neighbour I hadn't spoken to in ages, Diane, from 2 houses down. "Meg," she said, "I heard they moved out. Are you all right?" It took me a moment to answer. "I am," I said. "Better than I've been." She paused, then laughed softly. "You sound it." We talked for 20 minutes, about nothing and everything, the weather, her arthritis, a recipe for peach cobbler. She asked if I wanted to come to the quilting circle again. I hadn't been in 2 years. Always an excuse, always something else. But this time, I said yes. That evening, I pulled out my old sewing basket. It still smelled faintly of cedar and chamomile. I sorted the spools, touched the fabrics I used to love. My hands were slower now, stiffer, but still remembered the rhythm. It didn't matter if I finished anything. It only mattered that I'd begun. Later that week, I went to the community centre. The quilting room was smaller than I remembered, warmer, familiar faces, a few new ones. I sat beside Beatrice, and when she handed me a square of fabric, she said nothing, just smiled. And I stitched. Not perfectly, not quickly, but with care. It felt like building something again, something soft, something mine. That night I came home tired, in the good way, the kind of tired that comes from doing something with your hands, from sharing space with women who know what silence costs and what reclaiming it feels like. I didn't think about Caleb or Morgan. I didn't replay old arguments or question my decisions. Instead, I set the sewing basket down beside my chair, made a cup of tea, and watched the wind play through the curtains. There's a moment in every day now where I remember to breathe differently. Not shallow, not braced, but full. That's how I know I'm still healing, still moving, not backward, not bitter, just forward. I don't check the mailbox every day anymore. Some days it stays empty. Some days there's only junk. But sometimes there's a letter from Lily. Always handwritten, always signed with a little heart. She tells me about her classes, her roommates, a pie she baked that turned out questionably beige. She never asks for anything, she just includes me. And somehow, that feels like the purest kind of love. There's peace in that, being remembered, not needed. The garden has come back to life. I don't mean that in some flowery, symbolic way. I mean the soil's looser, richer. The tomatoes are climbing again, and the basil's already seeding. Things grow when they're not being trampled. I spend most mornings there now, with dirt under my nails and sun on my neck. My knees hurt when I kneel too long, but I do it anyway. Pain isn't always a warning. Sometimes it's just the body saying, I'm still here. Beatrice visits on Thursdays. We sit on the porch, drink iced tea, gossip gently. The neighbour's boy broke a window with a baseball. She clucks her tongue every time she tells it. Her laugh is still my favourite sound. She brings shortbread or jam or little things she finds at the market that look like me. She never stays too long. She knows I like my solitude, and she honours it without taking offence. That, too, is a kind of love. I haven't heard from Caleb since the letter. No visits, no more phone calls. The envelope's still in my drawer, beside the old birthday card and John's final note. Some days I think about writing back. Other days, I don't. I've stopped expecting the apology to come in the right words, in the right tone, at the right time. That kind of waiting is just another version of silence. I forgave him, quietly, not for his sake, for mine. But forgiveness doesn't mean return. There's a difference. The house is quiet now, in the best way. My chair sits where it always belonged. The radio hums softly in the background. The kitchen carries only the smells I bring into it. No one rearranges the furniture. No one moves my things. Every object is right where I left it, and every minute is mine. I walk through these rooms now like someone who belongs, not just legally, spiritually, with presence. This isn't a victory speech. There's no banner waving above my door. But there's a steadiness in me now, a line I found and held, a name I remembered to carry. I was always Meg Richardson, even when they tried to make me smaller, even when I tried to disappear just to keep the peace, even when I called disrespect by softer names. Now I know better. I still get lonely sometimes. Of course I do. This isn't a fairy tale. But solitude isn't the same as emptiness. Loneliness visits. Peace stays. And peace, I've found, is a room you build yourself. Slowly, patiently, with boundaries and grace, and the refusal to hand your life over without consent. If someone reading this is where I was, quieted, cornered, exhausted by the very people you raised or welcomed. I hope you remember this. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not cruel for wanting space. You are not wrong to change the locks, to draw the line, to choose yourself after years of being last in your own home. You are not alone. You are simply done. And when you are done, truly done, the world opens again. Small at first, then wider, then full. I don't want anyone's applause. I just want my mornings, and I have them now.